Good morning. How you feeling about technology right now?
Well, a little frustrated on the technology front. We invested in some new equipment for the roadshow, and it failed miserably, or more than likely, I failed miserably because I'm not very tech savvy in any of this. But we'll learn it. We'll get it together. It's March 29th, 2022. Welcome aboard, folks. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, and we are episode 568.
Yes, we are. We're 568, and there's only 4 teams left.
Spring breaking it down to the Panhandle.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We have 4 teams left to final. Yeah, I'm spring breaking it here in the Panhandle, the Redneck Riviera almost, hanging out for the week, trying to relax a little bit, enjoy a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of time off. But as you can see, we never take time off from the podcast. We might take it from coaching and training peaks and unwind a little bit, but the podcast remains, and we come to you twice a week. It's your first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, that your time is valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do race recaps. We'll do race previews, having the occasional guest. For the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, best friends, athletes, just kick back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through as both coaches and athletes, and also just as humans. We also talk about what our athletes are going through. We work with a wide range of athletes across the globe, from beginner level athletes just trying to make it to the finish line, athletes trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between and from all over. The majority of our athletes are from the U.S., but we also work with athletes across the globe internationally, and we'll use the conversations we have with them and the feedback and training peaks, emails, text messages, phone calls to kind of drive the topic of discussion. Because let's be honest, we're all going through the same shit. It might have a few different interchangeable words in it, but we're all going through life. And so a lot of times what our athletes are going through, or what Mike and I are going through, is very applicable to your life, or at least, one of the obstacles or things interchangeable that you can hopefully take something from it. So we'll use them. We'll also go into our Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group, and we'll use them to drive the topic of the day sometimes. But it's also just a really great community and a resource to answer questions that you might have. No question is stupid. We all have them. Most people are just afraid to ask them. So hop in there, answer one simple question. Again, that's on Facebook and Crushing Iron Group, and we'll let you in. A lot of good action right now as the race season is heating up. You got Texas 70.3, you got Oceanside 70.3 coming this weekend. You got Fulls coming. The season is upon us, and so we'll use again, go through there. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We most certainly don't do ads. And the only agenda that we have is to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
And I'm grateful for that, man, because I like to be happy and healthy in my journey. I didn't realize you're on Central Time down there.
Yeah, we had a little snafu this morning, but we'll take that up with the corporate office later today and get things streamlined for the next one. Yeah, Central Time and down here in Destin. So yeah, just Central Time, and I forgot you were. We'll flip flop, because we'll both be on Central for the next cast, because you'll be out of Chattanooga, and then next week I'll be in Chattanooga Eastern, and you'll be in Central. So
correct.
We'll flip flop them back and forth, but we'll always make things work. But I'm excited. I'm pumped. We got big races coming up this weekend. Again, like I mentioned, Texas 70.3 and Oceanside 70.3, which I need to look that up because I know that it's a jacked pros race, more so for the females, but also for the men, just not as loaded. The women's field is absolutely just like it's. I think the men's field has like 40 to 50 pros, and then the women is 40 to 50. It's a loaded field. As all the pros kind of get their big race out of or one of their races out of the way before they head to St. George for the technically quote unquote 2021 World Championship. That's rotating to St. George this year to fill the gap from last year. But it's a huge prize purse, and it's still the title of a world championship. So, and I think that's also going to be broadcast on Outside TV. I'll do some little more research on that because I know that I want to watch it, and that'll be on Saturday, West Coast time. So I'll look up, maybe have some more info later this year. And I will tease this, even though you and I kind of talked before we went on air today. That there was a recent interview with Andrew Messick, and they are, from what I understand after listening to it, heavily considering a world championship rotation.
Oh, really?
Out of Kona. Yeah.
Interesting.
And listen, I don't blame them. With the last 2 or 3 years, they've been kind of held hostage from the state of Hawaii. And listen, Ironman is a distance, yes, but it's a business first and foremost. If you can't have and hold the world championship, then it's not going to do very well. And I honestly do believe, with the obviously outside of the last year at 70.3 Worlds in St. George, where they changed things up the last minute, unfortunately, with the men's and women's race. I really do think they're trying to be very proactive and aggressive in providing opportunities for these World Championship events to have, like Kona will this year, a women's only race day and a men's only race day. I think it's fantastic for the sport. I think it'll be bring about a lot more fair conditions for both age groupers and pros to have females one day. I mean, why not? Have more people come, let it be a bigger event, but then you kind of look at the constraints that Kona has, just from a being able to house everyone, how expensive it is. It's insanely expensive for anyone to come. U.S. athletes, you're spending a shit ton of money, and then so I think it honestly would be what I think would be wonderful that would happen. And obviously you have the old, and listen, don't tell me that, well, look at St. George this year, it's they're basically begging people, to come, oh, well, congratulations, you won, last year you were all world athlete, rhinestone level, we would love to welcome you to the Ironman championships in St. George. Like, don't tell me that says that it's not sustainable, it won't happen, because I 100% disagree. The reason you're not seeing a lot of entries into St. George it has nothing to do with it being the World Championship alone. It's because people had a choice, right? It was either you can go to Kona or you can go to St. George. Most everybody's going to choose to go to Kona because it's Kona, right? But if it was only St. George this year and there wasn't a Kona, this wouldn't be happening. People would be clamoring to qualify to go to St. George to compete in the World Championship. Plus, if you look, and you rotate it and you go from Kona one year, maybe you do Kona every other year, and then the other years you go to Europe or you go to Asia, you go somewhere else to have that event. I do think it's fair for international athletes to have the opportunity to participate on their home turf. But what I find fascinating is the thought, and again, I don't have like an inside scoop or anything, but I think what would be very cool is if Kona happened every year, but it was only the World Championship every other year. So let's say they have the Ironman World Championship this year in Kona. Next year it's, in Australia, but in October you still have Ironman Hawaii. So the general public, age groupers, can go participate and I guarantee you it would sign up. It would sell out in 24 to 48 hours. It would give age groupers and other people, that aren't at the elite level, a chance to, race on an iconic course, an iconic venue. But also, and we work with athletes that go to Kona. I know a lot of athletes personally that I don't coach that go, and they would tell you that while it's legendary, it has the mystique about it. It's really not one of the most exciting, awesome courses in towns. It's got the legend of Kona is what it is, but it's a fairly boring course in a lot of ways. And there are harder courses, there are more exciting courses. So give it to people, right? Like throw in an Ironman Frankfurt one year, it puts something different, right? Or there's some other different ones that are just a lot more difficult and hilly. I think it's a great opportunity. Who knows if it'll happen, but we had this podcast 3 years ago that said it's time to rotate the Ironman World Championships. That was
we
before
took a lot of shit for that.
Down. Yeah, and we took a whole lot. But yeah, I think I think, and you look at the growth of the sport in general, it's growing from the bottom, which I think is great. You're getting a lot of new entry level into the sport that aren't necessarily concerned with going to Kona. They're concerned with just completing and having more opportunities to complete an Ironman. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's just a matter of when. I think it's also to put a little bit of pressure on the government and Kona to be like, hey, we want a 2-day event. If you can't give us a 2-day event, we're going somewhere else. And I think they kind of had their opt out this year with like, hey, you had a chance to explore this. And again, if Kona wasn't happening in Kona this year and it was just St. George as a world championship, then it'd be sold out and you couldn't get in. So yeah, I think it's a lot of changes might be coming. And listen, again, Ironman is a business, and if it's adapt or die kind of thing. It's your business model. You got to adapt at some point. You got to change things up, and see what happens. So that's our heavy triathlon talk for the day.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I question whether or not that would be that exciting of a race for a lot of people if it was just not Kona. If it wasn't the World Championships. I don't know. I'll see. And I'm not. Are we sure that it's even going to happen this year? Is the question. Is that like in stone? I mean, I guess nothing's ever in stone, but.
I don't think anything's ever in stone, but I can't see it not happening this year.
Yeah, I can't either, but I can
point to all things happening this year.
All right.
Yeah, but yeah, as of now, all things seem to be.
I just,
I mean, on the right things for all things to happen.
Yeah, it's just weird that it didn't happen last year to me, but like whatever. Just get out there and ride around on a bike. Ain't that big a deal. But I guess I understand where they're coming from. With that in mind, shall we shift into a little bit of training talk about me?
I mean, you have the floor. Go for it. Yeah,
well, I mean,
let's do it.
No, I think it'll set up what we're talking about because, obviously I'm set up to do Chat 70.3, and I've been really kind of struggling. And, lately again, I've been, you have this tendency, right, when you're behind, to like kind of just go out and, smash something and prove that you're sort of still in the game and whatever. And I was talking to Emily this morning about this, and she was talking about this concept of how most people seem more familiar or comfortable trying to dig out of a hole rather than climbing a mountain. Climbing out of a hole versus climbing a mountain. I mean, and I think there's a lot of relevance there because it just seems like, like it's like a day-to-day thing for me right now is how am I going to get in shape for that race? Because I feel like I'm a little behind, and then yesterday my theory was, all right, well, you haven't really built the aerobic base you need. And that's kind of how I feel. It's like, man, I'm trying to, but last week I went kind of hard on a bike and it sort of set me back for a couple of days. And I think a lot of times we, as triathletes, go through that cycle where, we can feel really good one day and then go out and get it. And the next day we're still pretty good. And then like 2 days later, we're just zapped. And it makes no sense because we don't recognize 3 days ago or whatever. And so I've been kind of thinking of it in terms of like, well, I've got 8 weeks or something, 7 or 8 weeks. And maybe it's just best for me to try and just build up my aerobic base as much as possible before I get to that race. What do you think of that, Coach?
I mean, listen, I'm all for responsibility, and being responsible and looking long term. And like, I get it. Like we just talked, before we went, before we went on air, is like, that's why you see so many people roller coaster, right? It's the all in or all out because it takes so much out of you. And it's habitual, right? Like, we all, I both work with athletes. So you get 2 weeks of green, 2 weeks of red, 2 weeks of green, 2 weeks of red, instead of, and it's the all in, all or nothing, right? And I think, listen, we're all kind of galvanized by the rush, right? And I'm talking about like the adrenaline rush. I'm talking about the rush to get to the start line, the rush to get fitness back, the rush to get there by X day. I haven't trained enough, but I've got 8 weeks. I can do it. I can do it for 8 weeks. And I think that, but what's going to happen is that, yes, you might make it a certain, but you're never going to find your ultimate performance, right? You might perform, but then what's going to happen is you're going to invest so much and go so all in that the time you're going to take off is going to set you back farther. And patience is just one of those things that most athletes don't have. They just don't have enough patience, right? To push things off to give themselves the best opportunity for success. I mean, I've been having this conversation myself, and internally just this week was, there's Wisconsin, out in September. I'm thinking, yeah, I could do the full for sure. I think, maybe And then I'm kind of looking at like the progression of what I would really want to do if I'm going to make the time, then the answer should be then do it the right way. Then do it right. And then look at things, right? And so I had to look at, and then like the back of your mind's also like, well, I did sign up for chat 70.3 a while ago, but then it's like you're rushing everything, and you're looking at, now I'm moving in June, and you're looking at, Hayden's now in school, so he's got kindergarten, so he's out of school, so there's no no day-to-day kind of window outside of some camps we've got him in where he's going to be watched and taken care for. So it's like, well, goes back to school mid-August, that kind of gives a little bit so it doesn't make sense for
Right.
me to probably does it make sense for me to do the 70.3? Sure. But but that doesn't sound fun, Mike. I want to go all in, because
I know.
That's what gets people out the door, right? Is the fear, right? The fear and the time frame and the procrastination that we put ourselves in, and some people thrive off that. They thrive off the I've got to dig, like I said, I got to dig myself out of this hole. I got to get back to work. I'm on a crunch. I got to make it happen. But it's also not sustainable, and it's never going to get you to where you want to go, right? It's never going to get you to the best possible place you can be when you come to race day. The best thing you can do is say, all right, listen, if I want to give myself the best shot to race well, it's probably not going to be this race that's staring me out in the face. The race that's staring me in the face might be the race I need to get me into the shape that I need to get in, right? We always talk about train so you can train the way you need to train to race well. And most people just go from train to, I hope this takes me to racing well. And so if you can kind of shift the mindset from digging yourself out of a hole to, I'm going to dig myself out of this hole, but then I'm going to take the extra dirt. I'm going to start slowly building my own kind of mountain, right? My own mound, slowly but surely. And you can kind of use it, kind of catapult you into a better mindset and a better approach to your, long-term training. Then maybe if you look in a 12-month window, you can kind of piece together things that make sense for you to do well. But again, that the doing it and continuing to do it are the hardest things, right? And most people they call it doing well off a short build or a short thing, but really you're just kind of getting back to baseline, right? Dig yourself out of a hole, get back in the hole. Dig yourself out of a hole, get back in the hole. And all you're doing is kind of like hanging around the same fitness level, and that's why people continue to see the same results year in and year out. But then up to a point that's sustainable because of your age. But then the older you get, your baseline begins to drop, right? Even if you're going on the roller coaster, which is all in, all out, all in, all out, you're just kind of the peak of the roller coaster, right? Because everybody loves roller coasters. They're exciting, they're thrilling. But the top of the roller coaster is the peak of your fitness. And then you go down, and you come back up, and you have the same peak again. But then once you start to get older, start to get busier, your life's more stressful, demands are higher, at some point your baseline is going to continue to degrade, and your usual 5:30 Ironman time is going to slowly, a couple years you're 5:30, you're 5:28, you're 5:34. Like you are who you are because of the roller coaster that you continue to stay on, or the hole you keep digging yourself out of to get back to ground level. But at some point those 5:30s are going to be 5:40s and the 5:50s and 5:60s, and or 6 hours. And what you're going to end up realizing is that you spent so much time on too many roller coasters, when if you had just hopped on the ski lift, if you will, and taken the slow steady ride to the top, then you'd be under 5 hours. But that's the long view, and that's not nearly as exciting, or it doesn't put you under the thumb of pressure of, God, I got to get this done right now. And if I don't, I'm going to humiliate myself, or I'm going to be so dejected. And so it's a fine line, right, between what gets you out the door and what's going to keep you out the door for the longest period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that patience piece is so difficult, man. I think you can look at I think what's happened in the Final Four that we got going is we saw teams like Duke and Carolina were terrible at the beginning of the year. And they probably just kept working on stuff that mattered, and they kind of sacrificed some short-term wins on occasion to get to the point where they're peaking at race time, which is the Final Four, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel the same way. It's sort of like, man, how can you just really keep, like right now, if I'm thinking about doing 70.3 here in chat, I really need to get out of my head this idea that I'm going to go out and, maybe set my best time rather than, just get to a place where, it's not going to kill me, and then just sort of like use that as a springboard if I decide to move towards Wisconsin, like you're debating with. And it just makes so much more sense. But like when you think about it, and we always talk about, this concept of getting faster and whatever, but like, certain athletes have the ability to be patient and they keep doing the easy runs and just building up that aerobic base and building up that foundation. And then next thing you know, 8 weeks later or whatever, they ran the same route a little bit faster with the same heart rate or whatever. And those are the things that are so hard to pinpoint when we're training. I think that, and that'll go into perfectly into the other thing you want to talk about now that it's getting warmer. People are going to start being like, wait a minute, like you always say, I'm getting slower, but it just all plays in, and we have to be able to be patient with heat as well, and be patient with, just temperature changes in general and how they affect us and what that really means. So I'm just sort of like really trying to, like I said last time, I'm trying to embrace the zone one vibe, and it's kind of good, because the one thing is I'm definitely not shelled, and it kind of has sparked a little more excitement in a weird way. It's like, because when you're trying to catch up too quickly, you're going to go through these, as you're getting older, man, it's like the pains and things like that seem to be more frequent. So I just don't want to have pain. And if I can get into a solid aerobic shape, maybe I'm not, quote unquote, working on my speed so much, but I do have the ability to hold on, and you just never know what can happen when you have good aerobic base. It's just like, if you hold out a little bit on that run, and then toward the end, you're like, man, I feel pretty good here. Maybe you got a little bit left that you don't even realize.
Yeah, and so much of it, and that comes with, so much of it is like prisoner of the moment syndrome and what have you done for me lately, and it kind of like from a fitness standpoint, I'll talk about kind of heat acclimation, which was a huge topic we had on the Zoom call for athletes last week. We have this roller coaster of emotions and fitness, and what it does is it kind of, if you think about it, right, like you dig yourself a hole, you make it, or you're the bottom of a roller coaster, you work your way all the way up to the top, you get to the top, and it's just like this gigantic peak, and you're like, you're at the top, you're ready to go down, you're feeling it, you're excited, you're screaming, this is great, and that's race day, and then you go all the way down again, right? So if you look at it, you got a down and up and a down. You spent more time on the down than you did the up, but people, we only remember and only want to equate what we've done lately, right? So let's say you pick things up the last 8 to 10 weeks of a race, then you go into race day, but I mean, I think I've had a pretty good stretch. And like, yeah, you've had a pretty good stretch. Let's use this for the rest of the year, but let's be honest with where we are and the work that we didn't do. Because if you ignored November, December, January, and then you spent 3 months of not doing anything or very, very, very little, and then you spent 3 months, doing stuff, then the amount of time you didn't do work is equal to the time that you did do work. And then what happens is people go into race day and they expect this huge blowout because all we remember, right, are our last block. How committed we were when we were under the gun, or the pressure was at the greatest, and we raced and we're so disappointed and dejected because all we remember is what we did do, right? We're not objective about the things that we didn't do, because and that's just human nature, right? We're not really, it's hard for us to be objective, and then you go and you get dejected and disappointed, so what do? Fall right back down to the hole. Instead of thinking like, listen, I know I didn't show up with the best fitness, but I showed myself that I have what it takes, right, to retain a certain level of structure, to hold myself accountable, to be consistent, to stay healthy, to get the work in. So I showed myself that I can do that, right? So take the race out of the way and pretend you didn't have it, and then try to duplicate that last block and do another block, and then do another block. And then towards the end of the year, then you'll be the fittest you've ever been, right? Don't yo-yo back and forth, right? And go all in with all excitement and expect so many things, and then be so dejected when the reality of the day set in, because it's also right, it's all cumulative, right? Cumulative fatigue, cumulative work, cumulative levels of an average of consistency. Is It's just as much about what you didn't do as much as you did. Like, people always ask about, how much swimming, that needs to do to run or to improve yourself, or running's a great one. If you're only running 2 or 3 days a week, then you're taking more days off running than you are running. How do you expect to get better? Right, and that goes for all things, right? You have 7 days a week. You should try, at least if you can, to do something more, depending on time availability. But we always focus on what we did do. And speaking of heat acclimation, because it is a great topic for this time of year, because most people are coming from cooler climates into hotter climates. Texas #3 might be pretty warm, or you're just the season itself from where you live is it's getting warmer. I went out this morning for a run. It was 99% humidity. It was 60, which was fine, but it was the humidity and the dew point that absolutely crushed my soul. And it's something to get used to, but going back to like the roller coaster, what have you done for me lately thing, I was answering this question with athletes. It's like, listen, the fittest person is always going to win, right? So don't ever give up fitness for heat acclimate, quote unquote, heat acclimation. And like going towards, going back to, what I said about being consistent and doing things more than you don't do things. Most people consider the heat acclimation. I went up and hit the sauna, for 2 or 3 times this week. I'm getting doing some heat acclimation. No, you're not. You're just sweating. That's it. 2 or 3 days a week isn't going to get you heat acclimated. You got to do it every single day for 10 to 14 days, and then you have to do it at least 5 days a week to retain it before you lose it. But people don't. They want to think like we get caught up in the. We always get caught up in the shortcut, right? Because it's easier to wrap our brain around. So what you see is, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, they consider, they'll go to the pool, they'll do a 2,500 3,000 yard swim, and then they'll hit the sauna for 20 or 30 minutes, and they'll take an ice cold water bottle in there with them, and they consider that heat acclimation. Let me be honest and be very frank. You're not acclimating to anything. You're just sweating. Okay. And then the goal of the heat acclimation is to raise your core temp enough to where your body has to adapt to it. If you do a swim, right, or even a hard swim, your body's still gonna be fairly cool. You're gonna hop out, you're gonna dry off, you're gonna take a couple swigs of water, again, taking your core temp down versus up. Then you're gonna hop in the sauna with your water bottle, and you're gonna drink it while you're in the sauna. That's not heat acclimation. You're preventing your core temp from raising. If you really want to heat acclimate in the sauna, then you need to do a very, very, very hard, like maybe a run workout on the treadmill with no fan, to where when the moment you walk into the sauna, your core temp is already high enough, and then you're going to spend 20 minutes in there minimum of time where your core temp is rising above its threshold of having to adapt and heat acclimate. But that means no water, right? Most people do the opposite way, or they do 2 easy rides a week with no fan on. And I'm like, that's also not heat acclimation, right? You can't do it twice. It's just all you're doing is sweating a lot. That's it. And most athletes, I would argue 90 to 95% of all athletes, because here's one thing that I think that athletes forget is when you're quote unquote trying to heat acclimate during a session, right? And the ultimate goal is to show up to race day as fit as possible,
Mm-hmm.
because the fitter athlete also is able to handle heat better than the out of shape athlete, or the less fit athlete. So every time you choose to do a session like a zone 2 ride with the fan off, or a long sleeve shirt on, you're sacrificing a fitness gain, because your RPE and your heart rate is going to be so much higher because you're not cooling yourself, right? And you're going to be pushing out less watts, right? So you're sacrificing fitness to do a sweaty bike ride. Same can be said if you're hopping on the treadmill and don't use a fan or wear a long sleeve shirt. You're sacrificing, and especially don't do it on an intensity, right? Intensity day. You're gonna smoke yourself. You're not gonna be able to push the watts you need to get the right stimulus. You're not gonna be able to rerun fast enough. The only reason and time you should focus on heat acclimation is if you work out and you're consistent enough to where you're as fit as you can possibly be, and you're heading to a climate where it's going to be hotter and more humid. And then at that point, The goal should be to get your sweat rate up enough in your last long ride or last long run to where you can nail your nutrition in this hotter climate, in this more humid environment, in this race with a higher dew point, because that's what matters most. Fitness, fueling first. Get those and nail those and make them complete. Cross every T, dot every I, do all those first before you even start to wonder and think about, do I need to heat acclimate? Check those boxes first, right? Figure out how you need to fuel. Go on a long bike ride, and overdress, right? Go on if you know you're going to go into a hotter, more humid climate, don't go out in your normal, regular jersey. Wear some arm warmers in your jersey, and then maybe a light jacket. Do that instead, so you can practice sweating more, right? Because you're going to have different needs, and if you're sweating more, you're going to need more. So get that all dialed in before you start worrying about heat acclimation. Nail the fueling piece of what's required of you to race well in it. Same for running. Maybe overdress in the run, sweat a little bit more, get hotter, get your core temp up. Figure out ways to mitigate the effects of that. Do all those details first before you post the sweaty pictures of all the sweat you dripped on your trainer mat because you did no fan at an hour easy spin, and now you feel like you're heat acclimated. You're not. You just sweat a lot. And then what's going to happen is, again, when you go to heat acclimation and work in hotter conditions, guess what? It also takes longer to recover, right? So if it's like athletes who are trying to lose weight to get to a specific race weight, you're sacrificing, most of you are sacrificing fuel and calories that are meant to replenish and recover during the most important time of repair, which is the peak phase, your most demanding phase. Volume is up, intensity is up. Don't starve your body when it's in need of the most fuel, right? That should have been done before, or just let the amount of volume you're doing naturally take care of the leaning out process if you even need to. So those are just like, pretty standard this time of year things we should all remind ourselves of when we're training and going into, environments. And again, going back to what you said, it's like, the roller coaster ride that is, don't try and skip ahead, right? If you should be doing more zone 1 and zone 2 work, right? Arthur Lynyard, famous run coach, was asked, how long should base season be? Where you're doing mostly, 80, 90% all easy zone 1, zone 2, but he said as long as possible. You can't ever have too long
Exactly.
of a base phase, right? We all want to 6 weeks probably enough. 8 weeks probably enough. I want to get to it. Always think long term, right? What's going to set myself up for the best season possible?
Yeah.
Not just the best race, but the best season.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I hear what you're saying is like, people will try to hack their way to a heat acclimation. And like lately I've been kind of, we have a lot of people that are building up to certain races and things like that. And, if you get out of, whack and start getting behind a little bit, instead of forcing up to the next level, I've really gotten in a habit of sort of, we talk about variation and you say varieties for the week and that sort of stuff like that. And I totally agree. I think it's one of those things where you have to sort of master each level. And I think a lot of times we get caught in a trap of pushing ourselves out of a level when we haven't mastered the last one. And that becomes the roller coaster too, right? So there's nothing wrong with sort of, even just repeating a week in a sense, where it's like, it's not a crazy build or anything like that. It's like, hey, let's do this a couple times, or like you're saying with the run, let's build this base, just like be more consistent with, just the little easier runs and things like that, because it's so tempting, I guess, when you feel a race coming on. And I have to always remind people, it's like, all right, I know in theory, you should be doing 6-hour rides, but you haven't even come close to really nailing 4 or, maybe a double 3 or something like that. And you kind of have to walk that fine line a lot of times where you're like, okay, let's just do the best that we can to peak ourselves for the race. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's like a peak for everybody, right? Like you are who you are. So we have to really pay attention to where you're at and not rushing things, because that just sets up, this sport, and I know you've seen it a lot where there's certain people that can kind of just stick with it and keep doing it because they just go do the, I don't want to say easy, but the kind of boring stuff over and over and over, and they master it. But a lot of people kind of dig out a hole after hole, and the next thing you know, that's the burnout, that's the injury, that's the whole thing like that, right? So it's just, and then, you know, I've seen so many people kind of do one or two Ironman and then just like fall off the face of the earth, you know? So what's the secret to that? And I think it is just sort of like being in the game and not doing anything fancy, but always kind of being around the target instead of always trying to, you know, hit 8 bullseyes in a row. Just kind of be around the target and just know that you can kind of adjust and adapt and keep building yourself and just building that overall strength. Because if you have that base, you're going to, you know, be in a lot better position to push past it than if you try to rush right through it. And the next thing you know, you're just like getting sick of it.
And stop looking at progression as seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, if you really, really, really want to, you know, if you're getting into a group, like, again, I'll use myself as an example, you know, talking about, you know, it could do a full in Wisconsin if you wanted to in September, you know, like, man, that's pretty close, get a lot going on. And it's like, you know, if I'm in a good groove, right, and I'm getting back into training, I've been pretty consistent, you know, the last 3 to 4 weeks. I'm finding some happiness and some balance and acceptance in where I am, and some, you know, some optimism of where I could go. Why insert an expectation, you know, like a race coming too early to where I have to deviate too much from a plan that I already feel like is working, right? But we all love that. We all love to insert chaos or pressure, or we procrastinate to put ourselves in a bind. You know, some people crave and like that level of stress. It might, you know, momentarily, you know, extract, you know, an ounce here earlier, but what you're going to give up is 2 gallons later.
Right.
You know, and so, like, you know, I'm looking at like, you know, I could probably, you know, to go through like the swing of emotions, not emotions, but yeah, I guess emotions and drive of, you know, because we always do like the, you know, debate things in our head. And I was like, all right, you know, I could just, you know, not race and just do Wisconsin. And then I'm like, all right, let's just have the conversation with yourself you would have with, you know, you would say, all right, if you're in a good spot, right, why tinker with a demand and a distance that's probably not going to fit in, and it's going to either make you, again, you know, what's going to allow you to stay on the ski lift, right, from the bottom of the mountain all the way to the top, slow, gradual, not very exciting, you know, the views are okay, but then you get to the top and you're like, I'm here, right? Or don't want to get on the roller coaster. And it's great. It's terrible. It's great. As I'm killing. I mean, I'm going to do 3 Ironman this year. My bike's on eBay, right? It's like, what's gonna set, like, and I think everyone knows that intrinsically. Like, you've been in the sport long enough, you know how much weight, right, you can carry throughout a training cycle. And when I say weight, I mean the weight of expectations and pressure and volume and intensity, to, you know, combined with life and what's life going to ask of you, right, in the future, right? Because we see these things, we just think that we can handle them better than, about not being able to do it. It's just that there's demands, right? So I was looking at the calendar and I was thinking, Hayden goes back to school, you know, I'm going to move to a new city, I'm going to get settled in, Hayden's not in school, he's going to go back like second week of August. Sweet. That gives me 3 weeks, right? So, like, you know, to put in volume or do it. And I'm like, oh, it's also the busiest race time of year for race season. I'm like, all right, let's be objective. Take away your impulse and the want to do, you know, and the, you know, your business partner and best friend, you know, says, hey, if you don't do one now, you might never do one again. You know, take that out of the conversation.
Wait a minute.
And say, and no, I'm just kidding, you know, kind of. And I said, all right, what would work best for progression, right? And then remove the year, right? Remove that I have to do it this season, right? Remove all that. And then I thought to myself, all right, so I looked at the calendar. I thought, all right, there's a sprint and an Olympic, a local one in Kansas City, you know, in June and July. And I could do those, just kind of, get back in the groove of thing, race a little bit more, race at a higher intensity that I have in the past, which is something that I think I frankly need as an athlete at this stage of where I am. And then progress more towards doing Madison 70.3. Right. So that's much more reasonable for where I am. It's also just more logical from a progression standpoint. Right. It also makes it easier. That time and availability makes that much easier for me to swallow. It's a much longer gradual ski lift progression that slowly trends where I've got plenty of time, not having to rush anything. Then, if I want to do a full, take a little bit of time off after that, and then the best time of year for me to train, without question, is November, December, January, February, March, right? When the full on school time for Hayden, slowest time of the year for races, for us as coaches, and then look at doing an early season next year, full. That makes sense, right? So now I'm looking at a 12-month overall, kind of progression and peaks and times to peak and times to draw back. That makes sense. Does it really work on my time frame of, impulsiveness or, satisfying my ego or checking a box of being an Ironman or, again, or what is that? I'm like, no, it doesn't. Not really. Does it make sense? Yes. Does it remove pressure and time and feeling like I have to do so much in a short window? Yes. Is that removing stress from my life? 100%. Does that mean I'm more likely to succeed? Yes. And these are all questions that I think we always should be asking ourselves, instead of being married and tied to, something that we previously committed to or that we thought worked best. If you're in a great groove and you see something that's working, then move with that, right? And find ways to cultivate or continue to cultivate an accountability, a level of accountability in a structure, in a training schedule that will help that continue to grow and progress where it is. Don't insert chaos, right? Or a giant expectation or a time crunch, because all that's going to do is continue to constrict you and stress you out to where you're eventually going to burst. And then you're going to take a step back, right? And so to me, it all goes back to that roller coaster ski lift analogy, where the roller coaster is always going to be at the same height. You might hit twice, but the valleys and the lows are going to be more frequent than the peaks. Instead of the long, slow journey from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain on the ski lift. It's boring. It's definitely more scenic. You can take it in. It's more gradual. But again, you're only getting one, right? You're only getting one peak. You're only making it to the top once versus having it, but it's the tip top, right? It is all the way to the very, 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 very top, probably 10 times as high as the top of the roller coaster. Or you can have 5 or 6, right? Little peaks of your roller coaster. But if you look at it, you're like, it felt high at the moment, but it wasn't that high at all, right? It was just, maybe 10, 15 floors up, versus the summit of a mountain. But it's hard to wrap your brain around that because it takes longer. And we always have this need for immediate fulfillment, right? To find, to give us a response that validates the effort that we're putting in right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we grew up in, there's a saying around alcoholic homes or whatever that, as a child, you grow up seeking excitement because you're
Mm-hmm.
conditioned for the unpredictable, and it's almost like you need chaos in your life. And I think a lot of what's going on now, I think there's probably more addictive tendencies across the board for everybody because of the way society is sort of developed, and with social media, and we have all of our triggers, and there's just that you need the rush. It's just like it has become commonplace. It's like like the Oscars, and nobody's watching the Oscars anymore. So whether or not it's a setup or something that they planned, but everyone's watching Will Smith slap Chris Rock, right? And like that becomes the excitement piece of the whole thing, whereas people used to just watch the Oscars and really care about the movies and what have you. But now it becomes this sort of like thing. So I guess the point is like, you can keep searching for that excitement and until you're crazy. But I think that's like the analogy for training, like I've been saying a lot more lately with athletes and because I really believe in this, is sort of like if you master today and feel good about today, and the goal is to look forward to tomorrow and to, something that you can handle, right? Because if you do a workout, if you're behind and all of a sudden you do a big workout and you sure as hell you can do it, right? And this is the other thing is if you've done it before and you've been in the training, you're like, oh, I've done Ironman before. I know I could go do this, 4.5 hour ride, with hard intervals and stuff like that. And you probably can go do it. But then you're fried, right? Like you don't look, you got to run the next day, and you certainly don't want to run. You're not looking forward to. Maybe you might give it a shot and get through it, and then you're just absolutely cooked, right? So that's why I think about this a lot with regard to racing. It's like, let's not speed up the calendar. Let's just go out and, it's one of those things where if you've done it before, you kind of understand it. You know what it takes to get through it. You might not be at your best, but you can figure it out on a race day, right? But until then, you talk about burning matches and things like that and just kind of creating this electric, exciting vibe. You're going to bed on Friday night and you're like, man, I got to go do a 4.5 hour ride tomorrow and I haven't even rode 2. Yeah, it's like, it's kind of exciting though, right? Like, let's see if I can do this. And then sure as hell you can do it. But that's why, I talk about, or you talk about all the time, that being undertrained versus overtrained. Let's just go into that race. If you're going to do it, and I agree with everything you're saying about that long-term plan. And by the way, is that an announcement that you're doing Texas next year?
That's my plan. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I was reading that between the lines, but
It fits in perfectly. Yeah. So I'm gonna do Wisconsin 70.3 this year and Ironman Texas next year.
Okay.
Long term.
All
I'm
right.
gonna rip off the rust and try to produce more than 70.3 power in a sprint and Olympic this year, which is like when all you've done is like, not all you've done, but when all you've pretty much done is long distance stuff for such a long period of time. You feel like you have that one speed and you think it's all out, and you're like, that all out was like 70.3 power, not Olympic, or sprint. So I feel I'm kind of excited about doing the local ones there and around Kansas, or where we're gonna live.
But that's
June
a
and I think it's
confident
June and
excitement.
August.
Yeah. It's not like an overwhelming excitement. You know what I mean?
It's super attainable, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I need that, right? It's all about what we need too.
That
It's
attainability,
what
man.
do I need to get me to where I want to go, not what do I need to fulfill my, a vacancy of impulsiveness or ego right this very minute. And I think that's ultimately, how we need to set, our life up, right? Is the least amount of stress we can have, the more resilient we are, just because our baseline is different, right? That we're not as stressed. And that goes to, that speaks to how you attack and how you approach volume and how much you're giving yourself and how much you're demanding of yourself. If you have bad days, but you're not shooting for the moon every single time, you're not overtraining, you're not doing so much intensity, you're going to bounce back, right? Because it's not that you're not setting a high bar, it's that the bar is gradual, right? You're not trying to, reach for the moon, each and every single workout. You're just trying to like get off the ground, get your space shuttle ready. And so, I think that's one of the things that we have to focus on is in training. The least amount of stress you can have that you put on yourself, the more successful you're going to be, right?
Yes.
Because you're not asking for imminent success or overnight. It happens, right? It just kind of it's organic in the fact that that's just becoming your routine and your structure, and it just happens versus you pinning a date on a calendar where you expect it to happen. And that's when people either set themselves up for massive failures of expectations or self-sabotage, where they just quit because they don't think they're going to be able to reach that expectation. So it's a fail either way, right? Instead of just committing to doing the work and working as hard as you possibly can and being smart about it and setting a bar. It's not about setting a bar low. Isn't about not reaching for the stars. It's about creating. It's about creating stairs, right? It's about create a bunch of new stairs every day that'll eventually reach you all the way up to the stars and the moon. Don't try to reach there every day, right? But not exciting, right? I don't want to build it. Just give it to me already, and a lot of people get caught up in, um, the the impulse acceptance of, yeah, but I'm gonna get it, because that's what gets them on the door. And then when they don't receive it, they don't have that goal met because they didn't do the right things for long enough. Then they get negative reinforcement, which see, this didn't work. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. Or it's like, wait, stop. Okay, first of all, hold off for a minute. Like, let's be realistic with where we've been, but let's be more worried about the indefinite ending that is your triathlon hobbyist career. It's like, it doesn't end every year, right? It goes on and on and on and on and on. Stop putting all these deadlines on it, right? Stop putting it that has to end at this date, and then start jumping through different hoops or setting up different expectations. Like, be long term, be progressive, right? And look for those small wins along the way that end up being giant victories, instead of trying to cut corners and take shortcuts and then expecting to get, listen, you can't pick up the Cliff Notes version and expect to have read the whole book, right? You made the choice to pick up the Cliff Notes version and expected that, right? Or you skipped class the first 3 months of the semester, and then you only went the last 2 weeks for the exam. Don't expect to get an A. Don't expect it, right? Be objective. Don't expect to know the whole book. If you write a great paper, you can expect to know enough to get by, right, with a C. Maybe if you have a good day, but don't expect a B or an A. Just don't. But most people expect that because we give ourselves things that we think are going to produce wins, even if it's unrealistic, because we're more concerned about how little can we do to get what we want versus the longevity of it and the process of it that should eventually get us where we want to go. That's just not something that most people are very interested in anymore.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more, man.
Couldn't agree more. Let's
I had
end
to
it on
throw
that
one of
one,
those
then.
in there, huh?
Let's end it on that one. I can go put on my Speedo and lay out by the pool.
Are you going to do that?
No, I'm not going to do that. Are you kidding me?
Come on, man.
No one wants to see this dad bod strutting around the. No,
I heard dad bods are it, man.
I'll probably I gotta go grab my hypercolor T-shirt off the balcony, and I'll probably wear that in the pool. I'll be the dad bod with the shirt on in the pool today.
You got the resistance cords going down there?
What'd you say?
Resistance cords in the pool?
Yeah, so I get some resistance cords. Hey, I did get up and swim yesterday morning. I got 1,500 in
the ocean?
over the pool. No, in the pool. Listen, I haven't swam in a while. I didn't trust myself to not get pulled out to sea and never come back again.
Yeah, good idea.
And if that happened, you guys wouldn't have this mediocre podcast to listen to today. But we'll be back to you again either on Thursday or Friday, but maybe a little more of a in-depth review of Oceanside and some links to how you can watch it online or on Outside TV and a kickoff for the season. Hope you're all having an awesome week. Mike, I appreciate you. Always head over to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for coaches to help you through the remainder of the year, check out our coaches tab and click on the one that suits you best and reach out. If you need anything from Mike, he is available at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. Good connect and have a great time. Go enjoy the beach.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, buddy. See you.
Good.